What up, dog?
What up? It's your boy Wildcard in the building. You know who that guy is.
What's happening?
Detroit Mel, the man with the grand master plan for the whole IOW network.
Right.
Hey, different theme song this
today. Yeah, so you wonder why we got the different theme song, huh?
Yeah. Hey,
we gonna get to that.
We gonna get to that. That theme song banging.
Be banging, don't it?
I'll be at the crib. Better leave those ghosts alone. Right. Trying to get my Barry White on.
Right,
Boy, that thing is funny.
I mean it does, now, man. That's slamming.
Yeah, we'll get to the importance of the theme song.
Right.
Welcome to another episode of the I Often Wonder podcast. Your favorite podcast.
Gang.
Black Mama Watcher, she's out getting the bag. They working her like
that money.
Slave. She getting that money.
Hey, let me hold something, girl. Let me hold something. I know you got something in that bag.
Look. I know we in the gas shortage, but she ain't worried about nothing.
Shoot, she works. She probably got a gas station in the backyard.
Getting so much money she got. Side note, people who are not in the food industry, it's been like a shortage of employees. I don't know.
Man, let me tell you something. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but every time I go into a restaurant,
it's taking too long.
They be, we don't have so and so here, and we don't have enough people to work. And I be seeing people on the corner begging for change. I want to put my back. Let me take you something. Come on. You need to come here.
You want some money?
Right. Come here.
Get a job. They
looking for folk.
I'm telling you,
that's ridiculous, man.
It's funny you say that. Just imagine they take all the homeless people and go put them in a restaurant right now.
Sure. At least get my burger a little faster.
That's for damn sure. I'm just saying that kills two birds with one stone.
Right.
Hey, y'all need help.
They need help. You need help. Put y'all huddle up.
Hey, scratch each other's back.
There we go.
Up. Come on, restaurant folks. Y'all need to get it together.
Come holler at me.
I know we going down a rabbit.
But go ahead.
Let's get all the preliminary stuff.
Preliminaries out the way.
Yeah, that pays the bills around.
Right.
Going over to the website www.ioftenwonder
19.
That is the website. You get all the information.
Right.
Anything IOW network related.
Right.
And of course, the biggest thing we got going on.
What's that?
The IOW network radio app.
Do tell.
Yeah. Go on over to the Apple store if you're an Apple iOS user.
Right.
Type in IOW network. It'll pop right up. Yeah. If you got an Android, Google Play users.
Mm-hmm.
I.O.W. No space network. Type it in just like that.
Just like that.
It'll pop right up.
And if you don't want to do that, you can go to we on Stream Meter. You can go ahead and type it in the same way, and it'll pop up right on your laptop or your desktop, in your office building, all over.
If you love music, it's on there.
It's on every music you can think of is on there.
All different type of genres.
Right, except for death metal.
Except for death metal?
Yeah, I don't have any death metal.
Oh, you didn't get no death metal yet?
I didn't get any death metal.
You didn't get no headbanging shit yet?
Not yet.
Come on.
No, let's say that for later.
Podcast is on there.
There. We got morning shows on there.
Oh, man.
But the reason why we're here.
Yes. Do tell.
We have on the show, and the reason why we got the music is the theme song for our guest that we have on.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to, I think it was a White Vault.
Yeah.
And you know how they pull up certain things that are similar to it?
Yeah.
So I saw this particular podcast, and I started listening to that.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this is good. So,
and sidebar, I've never got into, a literature podcast.
Right.
And it really wasn't until you was like, we got these people coming on.
Mm-hmm.
So, we had White Vault.
Right.
Then we had
Ars
Paradoxia. So, okay.
Yeah. So then, our friend L. Jeffrey Moore.
Yep.
Shout out to L. Jeffrey Moore, who's also on radio station.
Mm-hmm.
He had told us about that he was in White Vault.
Yeah.
And that's how I got turned on the White Vault and Ars Paradox, because he's on there. We started talking to Travis and Katie, and he mentioned these particular people that he knows them. I said, we got to get them on here because I love this podcast. So without further ado, we're going to introduce and bring on Mr. Steven Shell. And Cam, you have to tell us your last name because we forgot to ask.
Collins.
Sam Collins, there it is. Oh, Cam.
These are the creators
of Old Gods of Appalachia.
Make sure you hit that last A, family. It's Lachia.
Oh, Appalachia.
Appalachia.
Just
Oh,
remember,
Lachia.
if you say it wrong, Papa Steve will throw an Appalachia.
Yeah.
That's how you gotta remember it.
That's how you remember. If you say Appalachia, I'll throw an Appalachia.
Yeah. And the reason people will argue with us a little bit, and we don't care. But people will argue, and they're wrong. It's kind of like if you are from Appalachia, if you're from and Appalachia runs from technically from New York down to North Alabama, but if you were from the part where you are stigmatized and burdened with or blessed with being a hillbilly hill folk, your family tree is a wreath, like those kind of stereotypes, then that's how it's said. Where we're from in the plateau, Virginia, Kentucky, southwestern Virginia, Kentucky, western North Carolina, East Tennessee, up toward Pennsylvania and West Virginia and stuff. It's Appalachia. And kind of like north of the Potomac, they say Appalachia. Now, I ain't going to tell you you're wrong if you grew up in Pennsylvania and you're a mountain folk, and that's how you say it, or Ohio, what's where we hear it most. But like usually people who say Appalachia, they're not talking to us. They're talking about us. So that's why, because we got messages like, I've never heard it pronounced Appalachia until I listened to this podcast. Well, I'm sorry your life has been deprived, and you allow me to educate you because I have the time. But yeah, no, Appalachia Cam and I grew up in the Virginia coal fields, right up we could be in Kentucky in 10 minutes. We could be in Tennessee in 45. West Virginia, weirdly enough, was like an hour and change. We never went there. Never went to West Virginia. We gave those people their own state for a reason. Actually, we did. That reason was slavery, and they were on the right side of it. We were on the wrong side.
They were on the right side of that debate. Actually.
Yeah, but just weirdly, like we grew up going to East Tennessee. That was closest mall was an hour away from us down in East Tennessee. Wow. Kentucky was actually more rural. That part of Kentucky was more rural than where we were from.
Okay.
Relatively. But like there was a college in our town. That's we both did our undergrad there. But
and we both lived, and we lived in town. Like you lived a little further from town than I did, but not much. We lived in town.
My dad would tell me stories of like the high school. I went to the same high school my dad did. Doesn't exist anymore. It's where we graduated from. But Dad would tell us like how the coaches would treat the boys who lived in town, who could walk to school, way different than the boys who had to walk all the way out from the branch or from Polbridge Road or any of those like the more remote hollers and places out there. Because I'd walk home from football practice and my hair would be frozen because I wouldn't dry. I'm like, well, dry your hair, fool. What's wrong with you? But so we grew up. We like didn't my mama's house had an outhouse till I was 7 or 8 years old. Her old house, the house that door into the floor, one of our short stories.
The door into the floor is based on.
That house had an outhouse. Yeah, and that was and they sold that house in the 80s and moved into that little city of Norton. It's the smallest city in the state of Virginia, maybe 1,500 people.
Okay,
and it's a city. It's one of those things that
high school had more people in it.
Fauquier County, it's like you drive what you would think of as a block in any normal city. That's the town.
And that's it.
That's it. Like you blink, and they built a bypass of US 23 going by it, and it may as well not have existed because you're just like bebopping. Next thing you know, there's the next exit. And it's done. But yeah, it's just we grew up there, and I've been down in Asheville, which, if you don't know, is a liberal hippie paradise.
Yes, I got a good friend from Asheville.
I love Asheville.
That's what Sierra's from.
Yeah,
Sierra's from Asheville.
Yes, Sierra's from Asheville.
Asheville is a very
that's my sister.
It's a very well intended liberal place, and it is very white. It is white people with dreadlocks, white people without dreadlocks living together in racial harmony. That's pretty much what my city is. It is like we have fewer black doctors and lawyers now than we did in 1955.
Oh wow!
It is, and it's not because it's just gentrified.
It's
just people you can't afford. I don't live in Asheville. I live in Fletcher, which
I got a friend that's from Fletcher too,
which is the airport.
Right.
We'll tell you, like it's the little airport right there, and a little whatever. And I can live out here, but like if I wanted to live downtown, Just talking to a buddy I met when I was out encountering nature this morning.
Mhm.
Went on a walk. Who moved here from New York, and he's like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
I just bought like a tiny little bungalow like style house in Hendersonville, which is like over the hill." And he's like, "The prices were not that different than like suburban New York."
Oh,
He's
wow.
like, and I'm like, and he's like, "Yeah, Asheville is it's expensive. I love it here. I've been here since 04.
Mhm.
The food, the beer,
Mhm.
it's great. But everybody, please go home.
Breweries everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah. Can everybody just go home and give me my town back? Like we ceded down. It's like the Civil War. We ceded downtown. Like I'm writing a letter to my mama, dearest mama. We ceded downtown to the tourists last Friday. They have taken wicked weed and burial. We will retreat to Blue Ghost on Sweeten Creek and try to hold the line. You know,
I mean, I told you the last time we came over there to pick up merch and stuff. I'm like, I mean, I don't mean to be mean, but it's not been this nice in years.
Well, the problem with COVID in Asheville, though, is people look at Asheville and they're like, well, that's not Gatlinburg. That's not Orlando. That's not a big, we can go there. There won't be. And then we get busloads of Florida.
Right.
And no offense, Florida, but ain't nobody wants you here. Ain't nobody want no Florida in this town. Love y'all.
Florida is a weird place, boy. We can do a podcast on Florida.
Well, we'll do an expansion. Old Gods of Florida. That's actually scary for us to write.
It's just alligator monsters all day. Alligator monsters, giant bugs all the time.
Right.
Or it's just a documentary crew.
Yeah.
That's
right.
it.
Turn on the camera.
We don't have to write that one. It's a reality show.
It's a reality show.
That's true.
That's hilarious.
I know hate on Florida though. I got friends and family down in Tampa and St. Pete, and I got poetry.
Yeah,
I did slam poetry for years, so like I got a lot of poetry fam in like Miami and
okay.
Too. Shout out to Asia the Poet and Edwin Shepard and everybody that did Moonshine Productions down there. They were all good people. They were very very good to me when I was a touring poet. So
that's good.
It's crazy. You kind of hit the nail on the head about Asheville, how gentrified it's become. Because I have a good friend who's from Arden. And
right there, like
right there.
Right.
And,
okay, I see.
Yeah. And so he's like, yeah, Asheville, man, like it ain't like it used to be. You know, it honestly, it's the Biltmore. I mean, pretty much the Biltmore's right there.
And beer.
Beer. I mean, it's been built
beer
up.
Tourism.
Yeah.
And the beer tourists aren't that bad because at least they're coming for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're coming and they're hitting specific places, and sure, my spot might get blown up a little bit, but like, it's just folks like, oh, I just love the mountains, and they just want to wander around downtown without a mask, breathing on people, and you know, and just like, I love Western North Carolina. I've been here for since 04, 17 years now, I guess, and if I had to choose somewhere to live in Appalachia, in the mountains, in the Blue Ridge, this is it. I mean, I'm happy here.
Okay.
Cam's up in Tennessee, though.
Tennessee.
If I moved anywhere, I'd go to Knox. I live in Bristol, which is, it's weird. It's half in Tennessee and half in Virginia.
Yeah.
If I were going anywhere, if I'd go to Knoxville, I wouldn't go to Asheville. I would not deal with the shit you deal with.
Yeah.
And between the expense and the constant tourist, fuck no.
Yeah. Well, but through the trade-off is you go there, you got college football once the world comes back.
Oh yeah.
And that turns. You remember how Athens was? You went to grad school in Athens. You remember how that was?
I know. And Knoxville is a real city. It's not a tiny little place that is just a college town.
Yeah, Knoxville's nice.
I like Knoxville.
Like all the college football stuff stays downtown around the school, and you can totally avoid it and do other things. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine.
I mean, I'm with you, Cam. I wouldn't mind it.
Football also, I don't like Tennessee football.
Okay.
But I mean, I don't have a problem with football.
Shout
hey, when my school wants to come kick their ass, I'll go. Yay, fun.
You know, she wait.
I was about to ask. I was like, you must
not that we're good all the time or anything, because we're not. But I went to Georgia, so.
Yeah.
And
he said Athens. I figured that.
Yeah, once he said Athens, I'm like, yeah, that's a bulldog.
Shout out to Poetry Family in Knoxville, Fifth Woman Poetry Slam, Drew Drake, and a bunch of those cats that used to come over 40 to do poetry with us. That was my world before podcasting, was slam poetry and punk rock.
Okay.
So like I feel like Whenever I think of cities, it's one of the two things: either bands I played with or poets I've spit with and that kind of thing.
So our friend Sierra, the one I told that's from Asheville, she actually has a punk rock group called Case. Well, she used to have a punk rock group called Case Sensitive.
Case Sensitive. I'll have to look them up. I was in a hardcore band called Just Die.
Okay.
Just Die.
Okay.
Exclamation point. Just Die.
Her. She's not as hardcore. It's more, to me, it sounds more like alternative, soft rock / grunge. Yeah. To me, that's what it sounds like to me.
Okay.
You know,
that name is familiar. Like I keep an ear to the ground. I'll check it out. I'll talk to my boy Matt, who I was actually out. I went walking in a park and ended up going into the wilderness, because one of my buddies I hadn't seen in a while is a forester.
Okay.
Which is like a ranger, but like leveled up. Like he oversees rangers, and he decided he would like lead us on this hike. And next thing we know, we're like, this is not a trail anymore. This is wilderness. And I'm going to start broadcasting an episode right now because I don't think I'm coming out alive. It was some Deep Woods Off situation, but those dudes still play music, and I will definitely check that out. That name is familiar.
You'll like them. I play a lot of her music on our radio station. But we get ready to take our first break, so hold that thought.
For an engaging podcast, come to RBOP, Riddick's Book of Philosophy. My name's Philip Riddick. In my podcast, we have engaging and adult conversations, and we also have very interesting guests. Once again, if you want a very interesting podcast that is forward-thinking and mature, come to RBOP, RBOP. This podcast can be found anywhere podcasts are distributed, as well as YouTube and Facebook.
I need you to hold real still for me, sugar. Belle leaned over and took Cowboy's hand, and then reached out with one of the many skills she had learned on her travels, reached more with her heart and mind than her hand, and tried to know, to feel, if there was in fact a shadow or something marking the boy or following him. She focused her senses and the gift that rested deep within her, and looked at Cowboy Absher. What she saw shook her in a way that nothing had in a very long time. She saw Cowboy, but she saw him with a different name and in a different place. She saw him surrounded by death, by a culling. In fact, his entire blood family simply wiped out, only Cowboy left standing. And then she saw her. Belle saw Cowboy, once called.
And we are back.
We're back.
We're back. Welcome to another episode of the I Often Wonder podcast. We are here with Cam and Steve, the creators.
What's the name of the podcast?
Old Gods of Appalachia.
All right, my man.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, throw an Appalachia. I like that.
I hope you remember.
They did. I'm gonna throw Appalachia. So for guys who haven't heard the podcast, I encourage y'all. Go listen to it, check it out. Especially if you
sucks you in.
Oh, it did. Especially if you are into kind of more horror theme.
Right.
It is more gory, adult content. So
right.
Viewer discretion is advised. But in the first segment, we were kind of getting to know our guests, Cam and Steve. How big of an importance does that play into your writing and narrating with the podcast?
How big does what exactly?
Like kind of you're growing up in
huge.
It's everything.
Okay.
Yeah, it's everything.
It's a huge influence.
Yeah, like when I first came up with the idea for kind of for the very 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 primordial base of what this show would become, it was like, it's funny, and I haven't said this anywhere else. I was talking to, again, I keep talking about poetry today. It comes back. I was talking to my friend Deverick Buto, who's now a teacher at Penn, where he's up in the Philly. He and I were on a poetry slam team together, and I had written mine, I'd written a poem actually in Appalachian dialect called Hounds. And I did it, and usually when I perform slam, this was my neutral slam voice, which is still Southern, still Appalachian, but it's a little cleaner and easier to follow. And for that poem, I relaxed into, like, what was the line? Teaching the white men in my family about privilege is like teaching history to hound dogs. Asking them to recite their pedigree without ever showing their teeth, asking them to bite the hand that has fed them for so long. And like I leaned into the accent, and they're like, you should write more stuff like in the Appalachian dialect. And I was like offended. I was like, I'm like, it is not a party trick. It is not a thing that I just whip out, and lo and behold, now it's my job to undo everything my college education and communication programming to do to neutralize. It's just to be like, can I use the word berm? Does anybody know what berm? I'm going to use it. Berm. He stood on the berm and looked down at the body. But for us, I mean, for me, and I'll let Cam can speak for herself. I grew up in a really religious household.
I can tell.
My daddy was a Gideon, meaning he handed out Bibles even places they didn't want Bibles, or where Bibles legally should not be, like at the front of a school on the first day of. Dad, the Constitution. But anyway, so like for me, we grew up like we were two punk rock nerd kids who were into goth and horror stuff, and of course, so we were accused of being devil worshippers.
Right.
Cam, where do they think you knew the way to?
the secret graveyards where we were conducting our rituals.
Yeah, her principal pulled her and her friends into the legitimate, actual, real place at the principal's office and had that conversation of, show us the way to the secret graveyard where you all are doing.
They got really, really mad when I just started laughing. They real mad.
Like,
sorry, you sound crazy.
As a 16-year veteran teacher, I can tell you right now, high school principals, they don't take kindly to being laughed at families.
I understand.
I can imagine.
So for us, it's sort of a reaction to, like, we are proud of the resilience it takes to live and grow up in Appalachia. We are proud of the values of family and connectivity and community that come from it. But there is a lot of just jacked up stuff.
There's a lot of work that needs doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically.
And my push to produce the show, I had a lot of friends who I love very much, especially in Eastern Kentucky, who were doing this very, and I'm going to use liberal almost as a pejorative, but I'm going to say that because I'm far to the left of liberal. Like I voted for a guillotine in the last election. It's, if you find Bernie Sanders is a moderate as far as I'm concerned, so like there's this nice, very polite white liberal push of being like, look, Appalachia's not just Trump country. Look, we have black people, we have trans people, we have queer people, and like we're all here. And my response is always, and how have we treated them for 400 years? How have we? Let's talk about. Can we have that conversation? Can we talk about like how queer people have been treated? Can we talk about the suicide rates? Can we talk about Cam and I went to a high school of 900 people that graduated one black student in the 5 years that I was there.
Wow.
And a handful of Indian, Afghan, Pakistani, and other kids of color whose dads were doctors, so nobody messed with them because they had money. Like we talk about how the schools like Coburn and John I. Burton and the schools that actually took care of like the black kids of that county were the most underfunded and the smallest and the ones that got shit on, still won state championships in athletics, but still got crapped on by everybody else. Can we talk about? Can we do that in a spooky horror podcast way? Because if you try to talk about that directly, it is like trying to teach history to hound dogs.
Yeah.
They're not here for it. So we create our own Appalachia, and we just turn all the things that crapped on us and crapped on other and actual marginalized people into monsters. And we said, what if there was a reason we were like this? What if there was a darkness under because if you look at Appalachia, for example, West Virginia, bless West Virginia, the only state in the Union that is entirely within the Appalachian mountain chain. There is not a city larger than 60,000 people in that entire state.
True.
Think about how big Knoxville is. If you've been to Knoxville, Knoxville nor Asheville are big cities.
No.
The Appalachian chain.
But they're bigger than that, significantly.
Huh?
I said that they are significantly bigger than that.
What is the population of Knoxville right now? Let's hit that real quick.
It's
population of, and I kind of see Knoxville as the westernmost edge of Appalachia in Tennessee.
Okay.
Past Knoxville, you start fading into the flatlands. 186,000. So it's not, and Asheville, I think Asheville is about 110,000. So but then again, you also have a major university there that brings in a major
university, and not to, I mean, no offense, Asheville, but a lot more like real industry.
Oh yeah, sure.
It's not all tourism.
You don't offend me by dissing my town. I mean, like, my town is they're just now tearing down a monument that stood since the existence of the city to a slave-owning governor. Okay, they're just now tearing, and it's literally been a big stone penis in the middle of the city for like at this literally heart of the city for the entire run.
Big stone penis.
It is a big phallic dick. Is what it is, and they're finally taking it down. So no, Knoxville rules.
Hey, our governor's really stupid. All right,
that's true.
We know.
Real dumb that way. Y'all are real dumb that way. But but what I'm saying is, if you look through the course of Appalachia, there's not been thriving areas, and when there have been booms of industry, there are busts. There's something that always takes it away. And I am the last person in the world to play any kind of sympathy for a majority white region of the country, but we're also the last people it's totally okay to make fun of. Nobody's going to call you out for telling it. We are, but nobody on Twitter is going to drag you for telling a hillbilly redneck joke. Not in any kind of.
That's true.
It's just like, and again, that's not to play some sort of piss poor victim blaming thing, but it's just kind of like there's a lot of good that's in there that needs a lot of help right now.
Well, I would say this though, Steve. I think when it comes to hillbilly and rednecks, there's so many stereotypes and there's so much that's not really known outside of that community, that when someone says certain jokes or certain things, we believe it to be true to people that's outside of the community. Because the people who's not in that community, they don't know a lot about it. Unless you've been around it.
Well, that goes back to what we said about a lot of things.
Yeah, that's what in general. Same with black people, same with Jewish people. You can go down the line.
Where's the communication?
Right.
Where's the understanding?
But I'm just saying, with his point, I think because I had a friend. Now I did, being from Michigan, there's a lot of plants and stuff, so I did a lot of machining. And I worked on a lot of plants. And this guy, he's from very up north of Michigan, where we consider those to be hillbillies. And he was like, I'm a hillbilly, but I'm not a redneck. And so we had a big old discussion.
Like, what's the difference?
What's the difference? You know what I'm saying? Because for me, I grew up in the city most of my life. So I still want as the same, because I don't know.
Yeah.
And so we had this big old discussion about it. But to the point is like, I didn't know anything about hillbilly rednecks that I see on TV, the Beverly Hillbillies and what television, portrays as what a hillbilly is. It wasn't until I actually got grown and older and started meeting people till I started getting a little more interactive with different people. Because if you know anything about Detroit, it's very segregated. Yeah. Well, if they were white people, they were mostly my teachers when I was young, or principals, But everybody around me that were my friends or that was in my clique or in my neighborhood were mostly black. So I didn't experience different cultures outside of it's a lot of Jewish people, a lot of Middle Eastern people, but they stay to themselves too.
Yeah.
So
and in Appalachia too, the racism that exists there, and it's still there, is mostly xenophobic in nature.
Okay.
There's and people will say this is an urban legend, and if it is, I apologize. But my dad loved to tell the story of Grundy, Virginia, which is right up on the West Virginia line.
Okay.
Even the name of it, Grundy. And they had a badass wrestling program, like like a high school wrestling program. And in the late 60s, early 70s, they went to the state championship, which was in Richmond. And if black and white, as far as demographics go in Richmond, it's a much more integrated, much more. It's much more black folks there than there are in Southwest Virginia.
Right.
Yeah. So, and the guy was
especially in Richmond.
And I love Richmond. You know, shout out to Roscoe and shout out to all the writers did poetry slam people in Richmond. But like they're listening to this to follow my show, great. If they, y'all love them. But anyway, they got to the state championship, and this big heavyweight guy they had went in and was going to have to wrestle a black guy. And he didn't throw some big racist fit. He just literally stood there dumbfounded while the other guy just kind of like picked him up and pinned him because he'd never seen a black person in person in his life, much less wrestle one.
Right. Took a loss that day.
Yeah. And there's people who'll say, like, oh, that's an urban legend. That never happened. But that's kind of like, I think about the number of just people of color that I knew in general growing up. And like, I didn't know a Latino person until probably maybe college, last couple years of high school. Like it's just not a diverse area. Right. And I don't blame people for not staying, you know, like there's, and it's not so much like, you know, the Klan does exist and those kind of hate groups do nestle up in some parts of the mountains, but a lot of like the, you know, that just like you're talking about, it was a place where the white people who weren't wanted from the other parts of the country in, you know, in the early days, that's where they settled. That was the land nobody else could tame. So they went and settled and did whatever. And it created this little pocket reality of, you know, no outsider was trusted, you know, much less if you don't look like us. And the last thing I'll say real quick is that leads us to the Melungeons. Okay. Have you heard of the Melungeons at all?
I have not. Tell us more.
The Melungeons were a group of people. And my aunt, I always heard it kind of pejoratively growing up. My aunt would be like, y'all running around the house like a bunch of wild Melungeons. And Melungeons. That
sounds familiar, though. That saying actually sounds familiar. But go ahead.
Yeah, but Melungeons were a group of people who lived way up in the hills and the hollers. They only came to town ever so often, as my mama would say, to trade, you know, which means to buy groceries or to do whatever. And they were usually real socially awkward. Their English was kind of weird. Okay. And they had darker skin. And sometimes curlier hair and sometimes bigger eyes, and they were seen as like these weirdo exotics who lived way back out in the woods. And in the late 80s and early 90s, this guy named Brent Kennedy found out he had Melungeon blood. He was a college professor, and he started this Melungeon exploration and this celebration. And there were these rumors that they were descended from Portuguese sailors who had settled there forever ago and intermarried with Native Americans. There was rumors that Native Americans and freed slaves had settled the area, and they were just living apart from white people and whatever. But it became this exotic thing of like, oh, I'm Melungeon. I have culture. And they started talking about broad Melungeon noses and Melungeon cheekbones until finally, sweet Jesus and Moses on a motorcycle, DNA testing became a thing. And they got DNA tested, and it turns out the folks that were self-identifying as Melungeon, which does come from the Portuguese word for stranger, were basically genetically a triracial blend of white people, Native American people, and sub-Saharan African people.
Oh, wow.
So guess what? Most racist people in Southwest Virginia, proud of your Melungeon heritage, you're black. Merry Christmas. And guess what happened? Guess what happened to all the Melungeon Pride festivals? Guess what happened? They all went away. They all
just went away.
But it's the most brilliant thing, and the reason I bring it up is it got around the one drop rule.
Oh, wow.
The whole thing, like if you have one drop of black blood, you can't own. And they would say, we are Portuguese. We are Portuguese. So like they didn't have DNA tests in 1901. Like, you know, like, oh, these Portuguese people.
Okay, cool.
They're Portuguese. Okay, that's not black. I guess they can own this land and raise this tobacco. I guess that's cool, you know. And it was brilliant. But they did live apart.
Well, we can't prove it wrong.
No, like,
Steve. Yeah, I see. We're gonna have to do these in parts.
I'm so sorry.
No, don't get me wrong. I am enjoying it. But we're gonna have to do these in parts. Well, let me go ahead and take this quick break.
No, you good.
No, you good. We enjoy it.
Do you feel sluggish and tired? Not getting enough sleep? Are you looking for a more holistic and natural approach to your health and wellness? Well, the Healing Component has just what you're looking for. Our body butters, bath bombs, teas, and other CBD products will assist you on your journey to holistic health. Follow us on Instagram at The Healing Component.
He wasn't a small man. His hairy back was turned to her, and it looked like he was spooned around Mary Ann, the first girl who'd been sent to him. Oh, that was just nasty. At Milton's, even the highest rollers weren't allowed to sleep in the rooms, and no girl she knowed would ever go to sleep with a Johnny in her bed. Mary Ann was probably just playing possum. She was about to call quietly to Mary Ann when the man rolled over, still asleep, and brought Mary Ann with him as if she were a teddy bear. It was then Vera realized that it wasn't all of Mary Ann. Mary Ann was dead. Huge chunk.
And we are back. Welcome back to the episode that we are greatly enjoying.
Y'all picked that clip. Y'all picked the most gruesome thing I have ever written in my life. Like, we ran that clip by like 98 people, that segment through like 98 people, including like friends of ours who are sex workers, friends of ours who have, who write gorier stuff than we do. Mm-hmm. And that's the clip y'all pick. the pig monster eating. Oh,
good conversation starter.
And that's a good conversation. to bring the conversation back into forward, Cam. Yes. You're primarily for the writing part, right?
Yes. Like we both write the show, but that's I only occasionally voice a character here and there. Otherwise, I write and then do a lot of back end stuff. I take care of the technical aspects of keeping the show online and our website and all that stuff.
Okay. Kind of.
That's me.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah, so he does all the groundwork. I'm just here for good looks and conversation.
Exactly.
So, yes.
Exactly.
You feel me? So Cam, kind of take me and take our audience into what's your thought process? What's certain inspiration, certain things that you are seeing or hearing that kind of start getting the juices going to start writing off such great material?
Oh, wow. It's hard to tell. This season, the main inspiration was the song, the classic, folk song "In the Pines," which, I originally heard when Nirvana covered it in the 90s. I love that song. And I've, have listened to other versions of it since, and I've just always wanted to write something that was inspired by it because it's just mysterious and you're never quite sure what's going on, and you can attach a lot of narratives to it, especially given that there are so many different versions of it.
Right.
And it's one of those, folk songs you can kind of write your own lyrics to if you stay within this sort of general theme and rhyme and meter. And so I had talked to Steve when we were talking about season 2 about, hey, I want to write an episode this is the theme. And we talked and we're like, no, fuck it. We could write a whole season. We could write a whole season based around this. And so that's kind of what we went with. So for me, a lot of it, sometimes it's music, occasionally like dreams, but not really. It's not often. I mean, just like things just come to me.
Well, we have dreams like that. We need to talk.
Yeah.
But I can say though, the writing is great.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like about the writing is that the fact that your visual is taken away when you listen to a podcast.
So there's one sense.
So that sense is gone.
Yeah.
So when you are actually visualizing through your ears, and so to speak, when you can write something that person that's listening can not only visualize in what's going on, but can feel it at the same time. I think that's excellent writing.
Yeah.
Because I listened to some of the episodes, like I was telling Travis when we was talking to Travis and Katie, I said I like to listen to Old Gods. So I get up early in the morning and do a delivery job. Well, I used to until my job called me back. But anyway, and so I like to get up early in the morning and listen to it while it's dark outside. Because to me, that kind of sets the mood. It's a whole different feel when it's daylight outside and listen to it. I enjoy it, but I don't enjoy it as much.
It's funny you say
when
that.
I listen to it while it's dark outside.
It's funny you say that because I was listening to the podcast on the road trip, and I still got the same effect. But majority of the time, I was, I had the PlayStation on,
right,
and I was in darkness, and then like
it's just something about that it amplifies. Listen to it in darkness is like makes it so much better.
We got to talk about the music. Because
that intro, my God, that intro.
That would be
our friend Landon Blood.
Yeah, Landon Blood. Oh my God, that boy can sing.
That is his God-given government name. His name is Landon Blood. His sister's name is Angel Blood.
Wow.
Oh my God. That's arguably even better.
Yeah.
His son's name is Killian Blood, which is a pirate's name. If I've ever heard it. And he is an old dude. I'm the kind of nerd that I do medieval reenactment. It's not LARPing. Shut up. And I know I did another podcast that was just basically a radio show for medieval music and people making stuff for this group. And I met this dude, Landon Blood, which I assumed was his character's name.
Right.
No, that's his name. And he was. I was like, hey man, I really want. So there's this podcast that was, and I hate to give it fame, but the Black Tapes, because it's a seminal horror podcast. It was one of the first big fiction podcasts, and it's so good for the first couple of seasons. And then I think a writing partnership split, and it just it ends up like
you can tell the difference.
Yeah. Anyway, I won't go into that, but they had a theme song that I could not stand. But it stayed in my head, and whenever I heard it, I was like, "Oh yeah, it's my brain on. It's time to do this." So I reached out to Landon, and I was like, "Hey man, we worked on this other project together." I was like, "Hey, I'm doing this horror podcast, and I would like a song like this." And I gave him Daryl Scott's "You'll Never Leave Harlan Alive," which was on the show Justified.
Yes, that is one of my all-time favorite shows.
Brad Paisley did a version for that, but Daryl Scott's the guy who wrote it, and he fought Nashville for like 25 years to get the rights to his songs back.
Okay,
he wrote a lot of songs that other people made famous, and then he wanted them back. But and I'm like, I don't want to rip off this song. If I had my wish list and had money right now, I would buy. But I know Daryl Scott's never going to license this song ever again.
Right.
So he like went in and did something different. And the first season, there are no lyrics. That's just Landon mumbling through what he thought the melody would sound like, but they sound enough like words that I went and wrote words to them. So now if you see the lyrics and hear it, you're like, oh yeah, that's totally what he's saying. But then when the second season came, I was like, okay, dog, we got to write real lyrics.
Right.
And we did. But Landon is phenomenal. Jacob Cody Moore appears in the most recent season. He does the Railroad Man song at the end of the Railroad Man story.
Okay.
Blood on the Harp is a band from Atlanta. They are featured more heavily in our Patreon content, Build Mama a Coffin, which that's actually the name of one of their songs is Build Mama a Coffin.
Okay.
Which their singer wrote after his mom was diagnosed with cancer, and he wrote it after having a conversation with her wherein she pretty much told him, this is who's not invited to my funeral. You don't let these people, like they couldn't come see me in life, that I don't want them coming seeing me in death. And, it's got this whole
That's another example of music inspiring the show, because that entire story is based on that song.
Yeah, we're going to build Mama a coffin. We're going to make it out of pine. There'll be tears from sisters to make those hinges shine. Going to build Mama a coffin. I'm going to make it out of spruce. They can act sad and broken when they hear the news. That Mama's dead and gone. But so we came up with the story of an old witchy woman, old granny, who knew she was dying. And knew that her kids were going to have like at least 3 different ideas of where and how to bury her. And she knew that every one of them was being influenced by the forces under the mountain. So she figures out a way to come back for 3 days to set things right. and that's the premise of Bill, Mama, and Coffin. But and then in Bill, Mama, and Coffin, the Gravesend Weavers make an appearance. They're a group out of Texas and Oklahoma. They're friends of mine. They do kind of creepy horror music. The song "Come Children Come" is on Patreon.
Okay.
And then our closing music that everybody knows, which whenever you hit the cliffhanger and the
yeah.
that is a band called Those Poor Bastards.
Yeah, I remember
they are not with Appalachian. I will confess that they are from Wisconsin.
Okay.
But I fell in love with them when I was searching for creepy country music, and you
did Google search for creepy country music,
dark country music, gothic country music.
Okay.
You can go on Spotify and gothic. You'll find bands like Amigo the Devil, the Dead South are super big. They're like rock star big.
Okay.
Coulter Wall, he's really good. Coulter Wall blew my mind, and he's not on the show. I can't afford him right now.
Right now, yeah.
Right.
I heard his stuff, and he hit this line. He's got a song called "Sleeping on the Blacktop," and it's been in a million different movies and shows. Anytime you need like a good blues, like stomp type thing, it's the song they use. But he just does. There's the way he hits his vowels. I'm like, he's got to be from back home. Like, he's got to be from Wise freaking County, Virginia, or Letcher County, Kentucky. He's got to be. I went and looked him up. You know where that mother trucker is from? Saskatchewan, Canada.
Wow.
Those same Canadians have tricked us more than once.
Yeah, but no, there's a lot of rural areas in Canada.
Yep. And
I've been in Canada lots of times.
The Dead South, who I'm pretty sure have won some Grammys. They're like dudes like in white shirts and black bolo ties. They got kind of a whole look and a gimmick. I said they're like theme park. Like if you went to Epcot, they're like, this is what Appalachian music sounds like. They're great. But also Saskatchewan, motherfucking Canada. Like Coulter Wall's first album is called Invisible Appalachia. Like he owes us a check.
And
well, here's a sidebar, and look. So the greatest amount, I think I told you this too, the greatest amount of white supremacy groups are in Canada.
Really?
Yes.
Weird.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That is crazy. I saw that FBI statistic, and I was like,
well, I mean,
wow.
But you wouldn't think that because of the.
Hello, it's not a lot of us in Canada. It's too cold.
But it depends on where you are.
Cold.
There's a lot of us in Toronto.
That's Toronto.
I'm saying it depends on where you go.
That's Toronto.
Right. But
in New York, a hop, skip, and a jump across the border.
What you about to say, Steve?
I was going to say like Montreal is pretty. Can be a hot mix. Toronto's like right there from Michigan and like
it's
right
only
there.
4 hours. I
it's right there.
Toronto a lot. Yeah.
Like I got some poetry fan from Philly who that was like part of their touring circuit. They do like a spot in Philly, spot in New York, back to Toronto, then back down to Detroit, and then back to Philly. That would be like their tour. Because I have friends in Canada, like French Canada, which is Eastern Canada, like Montreal, like more the French influence, a little more diverse, but Toronto's right there on the edge. You go west into the prairies, and it's all like South Dakota.
Right, it is.
Like it's flat land and scared white men with guns. That's what you got.
But I wanted to ask you, something you had mentioned earlier, and I want to get back to it because I always wanted to ask you this question. What is a holler?
A holler?
Hollow.
Yeah. Oh, it's a hollow?
That's how it's spelled. It's spelled hollow, and we pronounce it holler.
But a holler is, it's usually a piece of land that's been carved out by a river or moving water that's resulted in a cleared out like little winding road that goes up where you could build houses and where people could settle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I used to watch Justified, they say, "Oh, down in the holler." I'm like,
"Yep."
I'm listening.
Like,
what's a holler?
What actually is a holler?
Let me ask you,
that's what it is.
You ever been out in a rural area and you made a wrong turn down a winding road and you got real scared?
Yes.
You've been in a holler.
Okay.
You've been in a holler.
Because it made me want to holler.
We did holler. There's a video that I did for funsies one morning. It was in our Facebook grouping. It was on our Twitter where somebody was like, I wish I could have Steve's voice as our GPS. So I'd just taken my Adderall. So I sat down and made a video of different locations with different characters from the show narrating GPS. And it's stuff like, like, family, you're leaving the house awful late tonight.
Are you sure that's a good idea? You might want to turn around. It's just stuff like that. It goes from there. But
you missed the turn for Ingalls.
That's the Western North Carolina show right there. That's well, at y'all's way, it'd be like, y'all missed the turn to the Harry Teats. Why don't y'all turn around?
Harry Teat, for those who don't know, is Harris Teeter. That's the grocery store.
Right, that's a grocery
All right. No, we know. We know.
Weirdly, Asheville keeps the Harry Teats down. There's one.
Really?
There's like an Ingalls every 600 yards, and one Publix, or maybe two Publixes, but there is one Harris Teeter, which is a superior grocery store.
It is a superior grocery store. Like when I lived in Athens, that was my grocery store. I love me some Harris Teeter.
Harris Teeter and Publix is my favorite. I can't stand Food Line.
Now, Food Line. My mama was a manager for Food Line in the 80s. And Food Line has gone down
all the way down.
Like this Food Line and Go Grocery duking it out before too long. Or what's the other one? Aldi. I mean, Aldi could be all right.
I like Aldi.
Aldi's all right. Aldi's just low rent Trader Joe's. It's fine.
Yes. Yes.
Have y'all have a Lidl?
Yes, we got a Lidl.
Lidl. That's like Aldi. That's like Costco Aldi.
Yeah,
right. Club Aldi kind of like We don't have Hickory has one, which is weird, but we don't have one. But I've been in them.
You'll go broke in Trader Joe's, man.
I love Trader Joe's too.
I stay out of Trader Joe's. I stay out of it. I stay.
$25 on cookie butter. Have you ever read the nutritional information on cookie butter? It is 400 calories for a spoonful.
Oh, wow.
It's like you just don't ever want to do that. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to yourself. You don't know. You don't want to know.
Well, I never count calories anyway, so it don't matter.
I don't count them.
That's a full-on jar of fat ass, and that's not even.
I count
and I'm not fat phobic or fat shaming. I am a chunky boy. All right, Chuck, just throwing that out there. But Trader Joe's will rob you blind, and you'll be thankful for it. You will thank them at the end and buy some flowers.
True that.
So I wanted to ask you too. Some of these cities that you named, they are real cities. I take it, right? Like Baker's Gap is a real city.
No.
That's a funny story.
Okay.
Baker's Gap is a real place, and he didn't know it when he started writing about it.
I'm
like, no, dude, Baker's Gap is real.
But it's not a town though. It's just like a stretch of a place that's named after it. It's not a town. It's a strong.
It's a real place.
It is real. Place.
Okay, it's a place.
But some stuff.
It's a gap, like a branch. All right. It's.
But some places like Barlow, for example, in season 1, Barlow is not a real place. It is the disaster, and the racist ass stuff that happens in that disaster is true.
Okay.
That happened in a town called Clay, Kentucky.
Okay.
And if you haven't listened to season 1, the real story is there was a strike in 1917. The year is still true. There was a strike, and they brought in, they hired scab workers to come in, and they hired mostly black men from Cincinnati. Did not tell them they were scabs, just told them they had jobs. So they showed up to a town that did not want them, already hated them, murdered several of them. And they gave them limited training. A lot of the men who were still working refused to teach them how to do things. And thus, eventually, there was a methane explosion that killed all of them. And the 61 they brought in, plus a handful of white people. And when the white people got pulled out of the mines and they could identify them, they called the family, they called the preacher. There was a casket. The black bodies, they would just chuck 5 and 6 into a crate and bury them outside of town. That is an absolute true story, and it's a shame of the state of Kentucky. In our world, when you dig that far down, you make that kind of noise, and then you offer up burnt bones and desecrated flesh. Well, the things under the ground,
there are consequences.
They're going to see that as an offering and an invitation, and they're going to come. And as a result, the whole town, burns to the ground.
Right. And that's why. But I'm saying that's what I like about.
They get murdered by fire zombies.
There's a lot of murder.
But I'm saying, but I like the writing because you talk about something that actually happened that's morally corrupt, right? But then in reality, there was no really quote unquote justice.
Exactly. But in our world, we can,
right.
We can. I may have to tell you about men whose eyeballs are liquefied and running like gelatinous tears.
Right.
Content warning: gelatinous tears.
Content warning: gelatinous tears.
But I can make sure that people answer for that. And just like the clip you played of the sex worker being murdered by the pig demon,
right?
There are consequences for that happening. When I actually ran that scene by my wife, and we are very pro sex work. Sex work is work. We have friends and family that are sex workers, and we are for it. Like like OnlyFans, and OnlyFans ain't no different than answering phones at Amazon, as far as I'm concerned. If you're telling me sex workers are selling their bodies and coal miners aren't, we got a big definition of what's selling your body, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
You really are out of touch with reality. Right there.
But the other thing was, I wanted to write about real things, but I didn't want to have the Twilight situation, where that poor little town that they set Twilight in Washington became just like a tourist hellscape of pubescent girls looking for sparkly vampire boys. And sure, it was good for the economy, but we're writing about disasters and people dying. So we will combine events, combine elements, move them in a timeline, move them to a different place. Like, for example, I've said this in different interviews, so I don't care to say it. Esau County, we talk a lot about Esau and Jacob County, Kentucky, Esau County, Virginia. That's straight the Bible right there. Esau comes from, we grew up in Wise County, Virginia. And when I was a stupid little kid, I'm like, I'm going to write, and I was learning to write. I'm going to write a tell-all novel, and I'm going to set it in Esau, Virginia, which is Wise spelled backwards. And we were doing a naming meeting or something. I'm like, Esau, I was laughing about, I'm like, wait, that kind of sounds like Esau. And I'm like,
there it is.
The trucker, here we go. And Gley Morgan, which is the town we reference a bunch in other stories, is a section of the town of Wise, Virginia. It was the original name of the coal camp that the town of Wise was born from. Tipton, which we reference in some places as being close to Baker's Gap, that's Johnson City. Cam, is that right?
That's Johnson City.
I know Johnson City.
And
Tennessee,
Bristol,
right?
Yep. Yeah. And Bristol is Paradise, because that was actually one of the original suggested names for Bristol when they were going to rename it from Goodsonville was Paradise.
Oh wow!
And in our reality,
man, you guys are dropping nuggets after nuggets.
Right.
That's we also take pride in that.
Yes,
and
you should.
When we first started, my biggest fear, and it's never find something to knock on that's actually wood. It's never happened. Is like I was waiting for like the hardcore Appalachian historian nerds coming out being like, well, actually, the mining disaster of 1943 is not in Snookersville.
You was waiting for the party poopers.
Yeah, I was
absolutely.
Because when we do our research and we do our reading, and some stuff people are like, oh, but this happened here. I'm like, yeah, and we moved it because
we moved it intentionally.
Right.
Alternate. That's why we call it an alternate Appalachia. It is an alternate history. It is not the real world, and we don't claim that it is.
And I frankly,
come on, y'all. There's monsters.
Death Island is a real place. It's underwater now. It was a little peninsula out on Wise Lake or Bear Creek Reservoir in Wise, Virginia. It's not there anymore. They've redammed part of it to where the water levels are different. So I moved that to Tennessee because I knew, and a lot of those kids, Shane Shepherd, out of that little gang of boys, that's me.
Wow.
And Dallas Shepherd is my cousin David. And Curtis Kilgore is my friend whose initials are CK. And Archie Stallard is my friend Dave Stallard. Archie was his papa's name. And I reference his dad as Grover Stallard. Grover Stallard was his dog. So I renamed his daddy after his dog. So I wanted to get all those Easter eggs in there, but I know some of our fans.
Right.
Like, we love them.
But
we didn't mean to start a cult.
Yeah.
We started a cult.
Last year, right after Memorial Day, when places started lifting some travel restrictions and COVID restrictions and things like that, we had a post that was like, hey, I'm gonna visit Asheville, does anybody know where Steve lives? And we're like, whoa. Don't ask our friends to dox us, thank you.
Right.
or the other ones, like before the pandemic, they're like, we should do like this big outdoor camping event and Steve and Kim can be the guest of honors. But we've read Misery, y'all.
We've read Misery.
We know how that shit ends.
We don't
We
care.
know,
Right,
No.
right.
No. You want some of this too, old man? No.
Yeah, it's just like I just want to buy you dinner, Steve. That comma's in a different place. I want to buy you, comma, Steve, for dinner. That's what that actually means. You know? And I love our fans. We have a passionate fan base who will buy.
We have amazing fans.
I hope that
but
voice.
You know, in every group, there are people who struggle with boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah. We have thankfully only had a few little bumps here and there of people who have overstepped or whatever, and they just get blocked and banished into the outer darkness where there's weeping and wailing.
And I mean, and a lot of them too have just been like self-aware enough to be like, oh, did I just cross a line? And we're kind of take a step back, and then they've been very respectful of that, and that's amazing. That's great.
Really back.
and Mel,
really back.
If you got that voice you can turn on, it's real easy with us, because like if you're alone in the dark, it's just me in your ear talking to you, fam.
Man, boy, Steve, before you got married, boy, you was a killer, boy.
I was not the best. I was an ugly.
See, no, Steve, you were downplaying it.
Oh yeah. You nailed it.
We'll melt the draws off.
Cam and I go way back. That's all I'm gonna say. Way back.
We go way back.
Hey, Cam, is he being real modest right now? He being modest.
He's being very modest.
Okay.
I was a key.
Listen, he has been a married man for quite some time now.
And my dance card is very full. Thank you very much. My wife is an understanding and not a jealous woman, but like,
yes,
you know,
she's a very understanding woman.
My wife, I'm very loud, and my wife hears me, and she heard me talking about Publix. She's like, I believe the plural of Publix is publices. That's who I married. She was a Spanish teacher. But very, very funny. All right. But with that, there's this tendency, and there's a whole science on it, of parasocial behavior of people becoming attached to podcast hosts, radio hosts. And there's studies on it all the way back to the 50s when television anchors and radio personalities first started talking to, instead of being like Mr. and Mrs. America, the news is instead of being like, hello America, hi Jim, John, Judy, Bob, and for me, hello family.
Yeah,
it's real easy to feel like you know me.
Right.
You know me intimately.
Well, we need to throw that family on, but
I like that. I like that touch. I like that.
That came from.
Oh my gosh.
That came from, well, number one, that comes from Slam, being like the one white dude in Slam, because everybody always call me fam or family or whatever, and I try not to appropriate AAVE, but like when you were talking, when you were like the one white dude there, it's real easy to get sucked into like family. So like Slam folks, we'd always greet each other as Slamly or fam or whatever. Right. But when I started responding to people on Twitter, leaving us compliments, I thought it sounded like kind of Manson cult like.
And I mean, in season 1, we do write about a cult, so there you go.
Yeah. And just like, because somebody was like, oh, like I liked somebody's piece of fan art. Like, oh, I've drawn the eyes of the old gods. And I was like, you haven't drawn their eyes yet, family, but they are aware of you. A bath in rosemary and sea salt should help with the burning. That was one of the first things.
And I'm pretty sure that's really when that started rolling, was when we started to write Cletus's arc.